All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to be able to present information regarding the Richmond Fund for Children and Youth's fiscal year 22-23 request for proposal. So we're going to be going through the RFP, which includes the guidelines and the application, and you will hear from the RFCY team. So my name is LaShonda White. I serve as the interim library and community services director and also uh, uh, direct the Department of Children and Youth. And I've been with the city for almost 16 years. It's been a pleasure. I'm really excited to be working for the city and with and on behalf of residents and community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleagues to be able to introduce themselves. Start with Ms. Morales.
Hello, everyone. My name is Guadalupe Morales. I support the Department of Children and Youth, but I am also located with our Community Services Recreation Division, and I have been with the city 6 years, going on 7 now.
My name is Patrick Seals. I also support the Department of Children and Youth and help facilitate this grant and also help facilitate the ECIA grant. We had an info session earlier today, and I've been with the city for 16 years as well. So looking forward to engaging with you all today.
Okay, so we are going to jump right in with our presentation. So Lupe, you can go to the first slide. And as people continue to join, please feel free to write your name, your organization, introduce yourself in the chat. We welcome you. Do want to let you all know that this meeting is being recorded, and we will post this meeting onto our website sometime this week so that you can review it again and again, because it will bring you joy. And you also can share it with others. Also, if you have questions throughout this presentation, please place those questions in the queue using the Q&A function. It's easy for us to be able to respond. Everyone can see the answers. We can keep track. We'll let you know if we're going to answer it live or if we can answer it when you ask it. We will be doing that. So please use the Q&A feature. All right. So for today, I'm going to provide an overview of the Richmond Fund for Children and Youth, let you know how it started and where we are. Then I'm going to turn it over to Guadalupe. She's going to go through eligibility and guideline review. Patrick will go over in depth the application, and then I will go over next steps, and then we'll open it up for any additional questions if we have not answered them throughout the presentation. And we will take stops throughout just to check in and see if there's anything that we need to clarify. Next slide, please. Some of our beautiful children doing a project at Archester. So the Richmond Kids First Initiative was also known as Measures E and K, was approved by Richmond voters June 5th of 2018. This was a grassroots effort that community-based organizations, community came together to really try and allocate funds from the city's general fund to be able to fund services for our young people. And so they got signatures, this item got placed on the ballot, and it was approved by Richmond voters. And that approval of that initiative became known as our Article 15 of the Richmond Charter. So you may hear us refer to this measure as the charter. It may be a ballot measure, it may be the Kids First Initiative, but they're all the same thing. So the initiative, what it did a few different things. A few of those things are listed here. It established the department. So the department didn't exist before this initiative. It started in 2018 at the end of December of 2018. So we're relatively new. I'm really excited to be here. It also funded a fund. So it allocated some funds from the city's general fund, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And it created an oversight board, a 15-member oversight board. And we have the first board in the city of Richmond, which has dedicated spots for young people. We're really excited about that. There are, we have right now spots for 8 young people between the age of 15 and 24. And then the other seats are available for adults. And so we have a very vibrant board, very diverse board We meet the first Monday of every month. So please join us if you're interested in hearing what we talk about. Next slide, please. So here is a depiction of our fund. And this is what was dictated to us in the ballot measure. So in fiscal year 18-19, and as I stated, that's when the ballot measure was approved in that fiscal year. The measures dictated that the city had to allocate a certain dollar amount to help develop and start the Department of Children and Youth. And so our fiscal year, just for information, goes from July 1st to June 30th. So that's what our fiscal year is. And so in that first year, $250,000 was allocated to help develop the department. We were able to use that fund to help pay for salaries for employees. We were able to pay for consulting services to help us do some of the other work that we had to do as part of the ballot measure, which was a community needs assessment and strategic investment plan. The following year, we got $700,000. So in total, we had $950,000 to help develop the department. Last year, which was 2021, as you see, there was a gap year. So there was no funds allocated from the city's general fund to support the department. So we've been able to not ask for additional money from the general fund, but we've been able to utilize that $950,000 to do the work we needed to do to get us where we are today, which was to be able to use 1% of the city's general fund, which in this case for the current fiscal year, which is 21-22, equated to about $1.8 million for us. And so per the ballot measure, as we ramp up with this new department and the new fund, the ballot measure specifies that in the first year of the fund, right, that it when we have to start giving out grants, so 1% of our city's general fund is allocated to this fund. And our general fund, for those who are interested, is a pot of money where we get money from property taxes, utility user tax, sales tax. So various revenue sources come together in what we call our general fund. And the city council is able to determine how to spend that money on various services and programs that are provided to Richmond residents. And so of that total, and in 21-22, which is the current year, it was about $188 million general fund. And so of that, we got 1%, which was 1.8 million. Per the ballot measure, it specifies that of that 1%, 90% goes back out the door to give out to organizations that provide services to young people via competitive grant process. And then the other 10% we get to keep to be able to continue to develop the department and support the department's needs. And then in the next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 22-23, we get 2% of the general fund. So that doubles the amount of money that we'll have to give out in grants and to support the department. And then in 23-24, it ramps up to 3%, and that's where it will stay. So 3% of the general fund. And so as you see, it goes from close to 2 million to mid 3.5 million, and then above $5 million if we use today's dollars in terms of our general fund revenue. So we're ramping up to that 3%, and then, like as I stated, that 3% is where our allocation will stay. Next slide, please. So if you applied for a grant for fiscal year 21-22, we had, as I said, 90% of that 1%. So we had almost $1.7 million to give out in grants, and we did that. We gave 20 organizations funding to do wonderful, wonderful work. We're really excited about that. That was our first grant cycle. And so those organizations that receive funding in the current year have the ability to have their grants renewed for 2 more years. So next fiscal year and then the year after. So if you're a current grantee and you have a grant with us, if you do all the wonderful things we know you're going to do, then we will recommend to our oversight board and then to the city council that those grants are renewed for not just 1 year, but then another year if you continue to do the work you need to do. And so that's what that blue bar is for the 3 years. And then because we're getting another kind of 1% on top of what we already have, we're getting that 2%, as I showed you in the slide before, we have more money to give away, which is why we have reissued the RFP. So we're estimating just say another $1.6, $1.7 million to be able to allocate to new organizations. And so those organizations that are funded, we don't know the amount, the number of organizations that will be funded in the current for next year, But those organizations will have the ability, if they do what they need to do, to have their funding renewed for 1 more year. So then those organizations that are funded in 22-23 will have the ability to have their grant, that same grant amount, allocated to them again in 23-24. And then we will do it 1 more time, because we get another 1% to get us to that 3% in year 23-24, and we'll reopen after we connect with our board. But our plan is to reissue the RFP again. And so those organizations will have the ability to have a grant for that 1 year. And that's what that gray box is. So that just gives you a sense of how we're ramping up in the first 3 years of the fund. Next slide. I talked about some of the things that the ballot measure, the initiative, charged us to do. And a few of those other things include doing a community needs assessment. And so a few years ago, we engaged a consultant, HTA, to help us do that work. And we collaborated with community-based organizations, service providers, governmental entities, youth, parents, guardians, to be able to provide us input on celebrating and highlighting the assets, the wonderful things that Richmond already has going for it, the wonderful things that Richmond is doing and organizations are doing on behalf of young people, but then also making sure we did a gap analysis and understood what was missing and where do we need to focus our dollars as part of this fund. So we went through that process, and from that community needs assessment, 6 priority areas were highlighted. And that became incorporated into and guided our strategic investment plan. So that let us know for the funds we're going to have for a 3-year period, how do we need to allocate those funds to different priorities. And so you'll see what those 6 priority areas are in a few slides, but we have a strategic investment plan, and that strategic investment plan helped dictate and guide what our request for proposal looked like. Next slide. Here are the 2 reports that I mentioned. Our community needs assessment, we did that in 2020. And then our strategic investment plan. These are 2 really great documents for you all to read if you have not done so already. They're on our website. It gives you a lot more information. It's just good information for you to have. You can utilize the information that's in here for grants that you may want to go after and other things, but lots of good data and information. But the strategic investment plan goes into detail about the priority areas and just provides, like I said, a wealth of information that I think will help you as you are applying for this grant. So please check out these resources and others on our website. Next slide.
LaShonda, can I just jump in?
Yes.
We have some organizations that might have been funded already or received an award. And 2 questions I just want you to hit, and I think you hit them, but just for the sake of everyone and the recording as well. We had a question is, are organizations who were awarded last year eligible to reapply this year for a new project?
And the answer is yes. Yes, you are. Our board, we brought it to our board. Our board made a decision that this cycle is open to everyone. Everyone, we're going to get into eligibility requirements, but for those who are eligible, and that does include organizations that received grants in the current year. So it does need to be for a new project, because as I stated, if you have a current grant for a specific project, if you do everything you need to do, we're going to recommend that you get funding again to continue that work for another 2 years. So yes, you are able to apply as an individual, as a collaborative for the current grant cycle for 22-23.
And another question was, this person asked, because you talked about renewal, for organizations that are currently funded, do we complete this RFP process to receive renewed funding?
You do not have to do that. No. So if you are like, you know what, I'm good. I have a program that's getting funded currently. I know we're going to do amazing work. We will reach out to you. And if you do everything you need to do and submit all your reports and everything, we will do our work to be able to take something to our oversight board and then to city council to recommend refunding the organizations that currently have grants. So if you have any specific questions, please give us a call or email us. So thank you, Patrick. As stated in the for fiscal year 22-23, we're opening it up again. And so we'll have a new allocation of $1.6 million, approximately, to awarding grants to community-based organizations, governmental entities that provide services to young people. Those organizations that are funded in 22-23 will have the ability of grant renewal for up to one additional period, 1 year period. And then just a reminder that, and we'll talk more about this later, but this is for organizations that are providing services to our young people up through age 24, which includes our disconnected youth. And it's to help address some of the issues that are facing those populations in both Richmond and unincorporated. Next slide. So here are the 6 priority areas that I mentioned that came out of our community needs assessment that are included in our strategic investment plan. And these are not in order of priority or importance. So we have behavioral health, we have education supported employment and training, we have out of school time, after school sports and enrichment activities. Then you have youth violence prevention, access to basic needs, and information guidance and case management. So those are our 6. And so what you will see in the application is that we are requiring that you select where the project that you are requesting funding for best fits. So what priority area does your program best align with? And we understand there's a lot of overlap, and you may say, well, it fits in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 categories, but we need you to be able to select one. And this is for our reporting purposes and tracking. And so this is how we are for right now, estimating that the allocation for those different priority areas could go, but we do have the ability to, these are estimated. So depending on how many organizations apply in each of these priority areas, we can recommend after our reviewers review and make recommendations for funding. You may see those numbers change a little bit, something maybe 25, something maybe 18. So we have the ability to change these estimated fund totals for the different priority areas. Next slide. All right, well, thank you for your time, and I will turn this over to Guadalupe for the next section.
All right, so I will walk us through the next part of the presentation, which is on eligibility and our guidelines. So it looks like most folks here are either current grantees, or I'm sure there's some folks who are not, but we can go over who's eligible. Organizations that primarily serve children, youth, and disconnected transitional age young adults. And for those that don't know, it's young people, usually age 16 to 24, who are neither working nor in school. And it's a big part of who we are trying to serve. Public agencies, that can be city, county, school districts eligible to apply, and nonprofit community-based organizations that have a 501c3 status. And if you don't have that, you may need a fiscal sponsor, and there's a few parameters for that which may be needed, but we'll go over it a little bit later. And then we'll touch a little bit more on each of the different components of eligibility, which are location, collaboration, and youth voice. All right, and then for those who may be familiar with our grant application and guidelines from last year, it's changed quite a bit. So last year for fiscal year 21-22, we had limited location eligibility to service providers in West Contra Costa and surrounding unincorporated areas. So this was areas like Kensington, Rodeo, Port Costa, El Sobrante, North Richmond. This year, we are expanding that location to a 15-mile radius that begins at City Hall. And that we hope with that, and this came from conversations with our oversight board, with staff, much deliberation. And we find that this will help us increase the pool of eligible applicants for all of our 6 priority areas. In particular, we hope that it will help priorities 4, 5, and 6. And then for anyone who does fall outside those boundary lines, if your boundary line doesn't touch your city, you can apply, but you'll need to collaborate with someone who is eligible as is on their own. So we'll go more into that in a bit. And just an example, this is what the location eligibility was last year. So we definitely have expanded it with the 15-mile radius. Collaboration. We really hope that everyone who applies for our grant does some sort of collaboration with someone, and it can come in many different forms, from information sharing to joint programming. We'll say in a nutshell that it basically means a substantial partnership that can include any or all of the following that are listed below. There's a way to do it that's most folks, we hope that it's articulated clearly or demonstrated in your application. And that also includes for folks who are explicitly named in the charter, Article 15, Section 5B. I would like to refer to that as 5B organizations. There is a requirement for collaboration to be clearly indicated in the application. However, it does not need to be formalized as a collaborative applicant. And again, I'll go over that in a few slides over. But the only folks who may need to officially apply as a collaborative applicant are folks who fall outside the boundary lines that will need to partner with someone who is in Richmond or is eligible as is in order to do that. But as is, there's a few different ways that this can take form. And we also want to know in your application how you're incorporating youth voice in your application as well. They're at the center of everything that this grant is about. So we hope that you can articulate and demonstrate that in your application about how they're involved in program design and development and outreach and implementation. At the end of the day, it's programming that will serve them. So we hope that there's a way that you can show us that. All right, so if you are an organization that does not have 501c3 status and you would like to apply, you will need to find a fiscal sponsor. We cannot do that for you, but you will need to have that ready when you submit your application, since they will be the ones who will serve as the applicant, and they will need to submit, or the two organizations will need to enter into service grant agreement, with the fiscal sponsor being the one kind of responsible for the logistics end. Use of funds. This grant will fund programs and projects that serve children and disconnected transitional age young adults. There are specific priority populations listed on our RFP. If you would like to take a glance at those, it's on page 11. And it will give you examples of what kinds of funding that it may be eligible for. And along with that is also a list of what you cannot use funds for. This is just a preliminary list. There's a full list on page 11 and 12 of the RFP, but if you try to submit an application for any of these types of services, your application will be disqualified. All right, so when you do apply, your application will fall into one of three, for the most part, one of three categories. We do require that you submit your financials, and that's for this purpose. If you have an annual operational budget under $250,000, you will be automatically placed in our small and emerging category. We like to have folks who are a little bit smaller organizations here because we want to evaluate you against each other in each of the priority areas, so you don't feel that there is much competitiveness with the larger single agency, which usually has a budget of greater than $250,000. So we like to give everyone a little bit more of a fair chance to be able to get some funding. And if you do formally submit an application with at least 2 organizations or more, you are considered a collaborative applicant. There is a benefit to that. You would be able to apply for more funding, and we have that slide that information a few slides over. But we also, again, recommend that if you would like to collaborate with other folks, you can fall into that umbrella. And if you would want a little bit more information on collaboration, we're really striving that we want to see that in all of our applicants. There's benefits to it, information sharing, you can do joint programming, leverage your funds. We really hope that you take a look at that. There's more information on pages 10 through 13 on how exactly we would like to see that in your application. All right, so how many applications can I submit? You can definitely submit more than one, but no more than 3, and that we request that all of them be substantially different. By that, we mean it can be either a different priority area. You can submit multiple ones in the same priority area, but it does have to be substantially different. That can also be a very different program design. It can be a different program location, or you can be targeting a different priority area. We just don't want folks to submit the same application across 3 different priority areas, hoping that one of them will stick. We will not accept that. And then also, if you happen to be a public agency, you can submit separate proposals per department or division. So if you're say the City of Richmond Library, you can submit up to 3. If you're employment and training, you can submit up to 3. It's considered to be different. And this is a summary table by applicant type. So this is a little bit, well, it's a lot of information, and it kind of shows you the different grant request ranges and other percentages that we have for each of our applicants. So for small and emerging, we have a grant request range of 30,000. You can apply up to $100,000. For single agency, you can apply for as little as 40,000 up to 150,000. And as mentioned, for collaborative applicants, you can apply for up to $200,000. So again, it's in your benefit if you would like to apply collaboratively. There's a benefit there. If you do happen to get an award, you may be applying for like $100,000. Depending on what the decisions of the review committee are, you might be getting a little bit more, or you might be getting a little bit less. So just keep that in mind. We have the maximum indirect rate, the same across the board. Indirect costs are essentially kind of the costs you accrue, or you can put in your budget for things like utilities. If you have in-person meetings, things like food, printing supplies. So we have that capped at 20%. And we also require a minimum match requirement, which again, across the board is 15%. So that is a percentage of the grant request that you will be submitting. And we just hope that that will show us that you can be sustainable in your programming, that you have diverse funding coming in to support your program and your organization. And that's something that we want to see in your application. And again, financial statements, we want that submitted as well. So a little bit more of an example. I know we're kind of going quickly through this. So you may be asking, how much should I apply for? How much am I eligible for? We don't have it listed on the other table, but we usually don't recommend that you apply for more than 40% of your annual budget. Again, that's just kind of a recommendation, but depending on how we feel like your organization, you might be running it, and if we see it's sustainable, this is just kind of our general recommendation for the max. So say you have a single agency and your annual budget is 300,000, the max that you can request within your parameters is 150,000. So 40% of that would be 120,000, and that's how much you would recommend as a max to apply for. And we have an example of a maximum indirect costs. Again, if you want a list of more specifically what those costs can be, or what kinds of eligible costs they are, it's on page 40 to 42 in the RFP. In this case, same example, we have a budget of 300,000. The rate we have is capped at 20. You request $100,000 in grant funding. You can put up to 20, you can allocate up to $20,000 on your budget for indirect costs. And then finally, for a minimum match requirement, again, you can have, there's more information on that on the RFP, but say that you have, same example, $300,000, your grant request is $100,000. We request that you match $15,000. And this can come in many different forms. This can be another grant that you maybe received. It could be cash, it could be in-kind resources. We just want you to show us that you can be sustainable and that your organization can be around for a long time to do the great work that you do. And lastly, again, I hope you get a chance to look really more into detail about our 6 priority areas. These were, we've come to these 6 after we had a long community assessment process, and it's in our strategic investment plan if you would like to look more into it. There's narrative included. There's options for supporting programming, the kinds of priority populations you want to serve within each of the 6 priority areas, and the kinds of results you want to see as well. So we hope that you can tailor your application in a way that really helps us understand that you want to serve these areas of these populations as well. We hope that really shines through in your application. So I think I walked through that pretty quickly, but I think unless anyone has any questions, we can move over to the online grant application process with Patrick.
We had a couple questions from that come in the chat, and they were transferred into the Q&A, so I'm happy to see that. One of them is they would like to apply for ECI and RFCY grants, and they are aware that they cannot win both. So first off, that's not true. So you are eligible to be awarded both. And it says, can we disclose that we apply to both grants in each application, which is fine, in case we are considered for both, or would this disqualify us? No, it doesn't disqualify you. It is not prohibited to apply for both, and it is not prohibited to actually receive both. So I would recommend that you do apply for both. Second, does the West Consciously Unified School District serve as a partner, or I'm guessing, could they be a partner? Absolutely. Now, I would need more information, but if you're speaking to say, hey, we fall outside of the location area, when Lupe was describing that 15-mile radius, the 15-mile radius does not touch our city. So as a consequence, we don't meet the location eligibility. However, we have for a number of years been in partnership and work collaboratively in Wisconsin Cross Unified School Districts. They could serve as a partner. Absolutely. So if that answers the question. So we will now move on to the grant application. And so the grant application is now an online grant application. And starting last year, thank you, Lupe. Starting last year, we transitioned it from hard copy submittal to an online portal and upload process. And so here's what the page looks like. It has some information about our webinars, which you're attending, some links to our e-news sign up, which we recommend that you do sign up for, just so that you stay abreast on all the things that are happening or any changes or updates that may take place. And then there's an online grant application form. And so below this, there are documents there, your narrative proposal templates or budget templates, the RFP. You download those documents onto your personal or work computer. You and your team begin to craft and draft language to submit to it. And then once you've gathered all your documents, you will complete the online grant application form. So we'll move forward. Next slide. So it's really a 5-step process to completing the RFP. First step is do your agency proposal, and then complete the narrative, complete your appendices, which include budget, demographics, activities and operations tables. Make sure that you have all the required documents to upload, and then you'll receive a proposal submission and acknowledgement. And the tip here is before you go to complete the upload and enter information about your organization, my recommendation is that you have everything that you need gathered. And we'll speak to some details about what actually that all includes. Next slide. So again, step 1 is the agency and proposal information. So this is just some basic information about your organization as it relates to your application. And as Lupe said, you can submit up to 3 applications, but they need to be substantially different or in different priority areas for that effect. Next slide. Step 2, again, in a little more detail, is the proposal narrative. You have a maximum of 10 pages. So that's very important to know, because you have some limited real estate as it relates to what you will complete and how you can write. We'll talk about what's not included in that 10 pages are your budgets or resumes, because you are allowed to upload resumes, you are allowed to upload your budget documents. Those documents are not included towards the 10-page count. Applications are going to be due Monday, February 7th at 2 p.m. And that is a hard stop, which means that we have already set up the portal to close at 2 p.m. on Monday, February 7th. So we hate to say no, but we will say no. So make sure that you don't miss the deadline. There will be no extensions. So make sure you do that. As it relates to the 10 pages, as you can see here, you can see how we're scoring. And this is important because it maybe gives you some insight into where you might want to prioritize the use of your 10 pages. And I do want to note that organizations who are Richmond-based will receive an additional 5 points on top of their final score. So organizations that are Richmond-based will receive an additional 5 points on top of their score. And this is in relationship to our Richmond Business Ordinance requirements and procurement in relationship to that. Next slide. Step 3, your budget table. And we'll go into much detail around this, but really make sure that your budget is clear, that it is accurate, and that it reflects your best guess what you'll need, and it shows some cost effectiveness, and it is linked to what you have in your proposal. And don't forget about the match that Lupe spoke about. Next slide. Required documents. So in addition to the proposal, budget, demographic, activities, operations table, here are some required documents that you will need to upload as well. So during this period, you may not be writing your narrative, but you can be working on gathering some of these documents, or people on your team can be working on gathering these documents. One is because we are a nonprofit, because we're a government, we are going to be entering the organizations who are 501c3. And I think Lupe spoke about if organizations do not have a 501c3 status, they can apply with a fiscal sponsor. But we need a copy of an IRS letter, a 501c3 letter from either your organization or your fiscal sponsor's organization to verify that you are 501c3. We'll need financial statements, and that can come in the form of either a 990N filing, which is for organizations that make less than 50,000, 990 filing, which is for organizations that make over 50,000, or we need audited or reviewed financials, right? So we need some financial documents or records that showing that you are filing your documents with the state. So we need one of those options. We also need a list of board of directors. Again, if you're a fiscal sponsor, we need an agreement. And if you are in partnership or collaborative, an official collaborative as an applicant, a collaborative applicant with a public agency, for example, like the school district, we need a letter of agreement, an LOA, that states that there is a formalized agreement between the organization and the public agency to apply jointly for this application. Again, you can see Appendix E because we have a sample. If you don't know what an LOA is or not quite sure how to draft one, we provide a sample there that can be used as a template. Next slide. Finally, because this again is an online submittal, whoever will be uploading documents and completing the application information via the portal, make sure that that individual has authorization from the board of directors for the organization that is applying. And there will be some recitals that will need to be said, or check boxes that say you agree that everything is true, everything is accurate, and you've uploaded all the documents and you understand the rules related to this RFQ, and then you do a electronic signature and receive an email receipt. Next slide. So let's jump into actually the proposal narrative, yeah. Next slide. So for the sake of the proposal, we'll be working from the framework of this fictitious organization that one of our former interns actually came up with. So this first section again is agency proposal information. And here we just want some very general information. What is the name of your organization, the address, who is the executive director or ED, who's the project manager, and contact information for them. And we want a brief program summary, like 40 words. What's significant about the agency proposal and information section is that the project manager, please make sure that whomever is selected as project manager is responsive and aware of the grant and the proposal. Because if we have questions, once applications are submitted, we'll be reaching out to this person. And so what we don't want to have is just putting someone's name there and that person is not aware or unaware of the details of the grant or is not responsive, because that could impact the application. If by some reason that person changes, please let us know as soon as you can so that nothing falls between the cracks. So for our hypothetical organization here is KidSpace, and the program summary is very brief. Callie's organization is KidSpace. It offers quality care and tutoring service to young children with an emphasis on providing LGBTQ+ and non-binary youth with safe spaces to learn. So Callie gave us a very pithy summary here that lets us know, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm serving young children with an emphasis on, she identifies a priority area and what she hopes to accomplish, which is, hey, we want to provide safe spaces. Next slide. So if your organization is not a 501c3, and you have a fiscal sponsor, you will provide contact information, address, name, project manager information there as well. When we move down to the program and project budget section, here is where kind of the rubber hits the road as it relates to continuity and consistency across your application. So things need to match, things need to align. The program and project budget is how much does it cost for a year to run the program that you are actually seeking grant funding for. The box over to it, amount of grant request, is how much are you asking the Richmond Fund for Children and Youth to grant you in grant dollars. So those are two different numbers. So our program or project could cost $50,000, but what the request might be would be 30,000, 35,000, right? It could be less, it could be all. But as Lupe said, you have to be aware of kind of the recommendations that we're setting forth. We also want to know how much money your organization brings in annually, right? So if we're thinking about it as a person, what is the income? How much money? And if you have a fiscal sponsor, we want to know how much money that organization brings in annually. So we want to know, even with a fiscal sponsor, we want to know the organizational annual budget, and we also want to know the fiscal sponsor's annual budget. And we also want you to identify what type of application you're applying for, whether you're applying for a small and emerging, a single agency, or a collaborative. Next slide. So if you're applying as a collaborative applicant, right, you are going to have a letter of agreement between your organization and your partner organizations, whoever they may be. We want that LOA, and we also want you to identify what that agency is and the contact person for that agency and what you consider their major roles and responsibilities. Subsequent to that, you see here the priority areas. And so as Lupe kind of reiterated, please become familiar with our strategic investment plan and the RFP, which kind of highlights details about it. We want you to let us know which priority area this application will be seeking funding for. We understand that there is overlap and that you may see that you hit priority area 2 and 3, or you may see that you hit priority area 5 and 1. What we're really asking here is which priority area best fits your proposed program or project. Not perfectly fits, not perfectly aligned. We understand that there's overlap, but look at it as which priority area best fits for the majority of what you're going to do, for over 50% of what you're going to do, is what we're seeking for you to do. Next slide. So here we get to actually the proposal narrative. So we've got the agency information, some general information about you, your fiscal sponsor, budget, priority areas, et cetera. Now we're jumping into the actual proposal narrative. Again, we're going to reiterate that you only have 10 pages, right? And someone might be thinking, well, if I go over 10 pages, what happens? If you go over 10 pages and you meet all the requirements, your application will likely be pushed forward, but our reviewers may mark you down depending on how many pages over 10 you go. So if you are at 15 pages, right, you may be marked down substantially. So adhering to the requirements is going to be important because our reviewers are going to be receiving these instructions as well. We're going to ask for a little larger program summary, up to 100 words. And this information, again, is helpful for us for our own reporting, so that when we need to speak to who applied and what were the programs that they were trying to apply for, we want to have something that we can grab so that we can share with the people that we report to, namely the council and also other staff. Agency history and capacity. So here we want you to briefly describe your agency, right? And we want to know, what is the history of your agency? How did it come to be? Where are you at? Who are you serving? Who have you been working with, right? So it's very general. And then we wanted you to describe your agency's experience providing those services. And then we want to, so basically this question here is getting into much more detail as it relates to the relationship that your organization has to the proposed program or project that you are recommending. We want to know now, not only have you been in business, you've been working, you've been around. Question 2 is really seeking, okay, how does what you've done link to what you're actually seeking the RFCY for funding? And we want you to demonstrate that your organization is well situated, it is well experienced, it has a knowledge, it has a team, it has a structure to support moving forward with grant funds to support the programming, right? And if you've been in partnership, we want to know that. We want to know your experience in dealing with communities that look like Richmond, and we want to know who you've been in partnership or collaboration with as it relates to those services. Next slide. Program design. Here we want you to identify the population that you will serve, how you plan to reach out to them, engage them, and retain them. And so this really speaks to a little bit more in depth the nature of your experience and the depth of your understanding as it relates to who you plan to impact. A lot of times people are proposing new projects and new programs. We want to know that if this is something new, that you understand who you're serving and what their needs are and how they may differ from other groups, which is why I think being familiar with our strategic investment plan and priority populations. What are the priority populations, right? That the RFCY recognizes may need additional supports. Understanding that is important. And it's linked to our demographic table, which we'll address a little later on. Describe the program and proposed services. So here is literally tell us what you're going to do, right? What is the structure of what you're going to do, the design, how long are you going to do it, how many days a week, where are you going to provide those services, what neighborhoods, what zip codes, and how is it that you're going to package that information and make sure that it is delivered to the people you say you want to serve. And this is linked to our activity and operations table. And so again, a tip on completing the grant application is there needs to be consistency. When we look at this question, we're also going to be looking at the table, and those things need to align. When we look at question 4, we're going to look at the demographic table. Those things need to align. Question 6 here, what role has youth had in informing you about providing service to them? So we want you to demonstrate that you've done your due diligence in not just speaking to caregivers, but you've also got some information as it relates to gathering data directly from young people, whether that's surveys, whether you have young people on your team, whether you've done outreach, however you're gathering data, we want to know that that's something that you've done, because we want to be including young people in the conversation as it relates to services that affect or impact them. Here we also want to know in question 7, who are the partners and what roles and responsibilities have you identified? We are encouraging you to be in partnership with people, not necessarily official collaboration, but we hope that organizations that are trying to support Richmond residents understand the landscape of organizations that are currently here providing services and are thinking, how is it that what we do can marry well with what other people provide? Because we recognize that we don't need to be operating in silos and we don't want to have services that are redundant. How can we leverage services, right? How can we supplement services? Those are all things that stand out when you're examining a grant application. Next slide. Question 8, please discuss how your proposed program that you're requesting funding for through this RFP has been impacted by COVID. We understand that COVID-19 has impacted organizations in a myriad of ways. They've impacted people just personally in a myriad of ways. And because you all are providing services to people, we recognize that it impacts them and impacts you. So we want to know, what does that look like? Has it impacted you as far as how you provide services? Has it impacted you in your staffing? Has it impacted you in relationship to your budget? Right? What does that look like? Because giving that context gives a frame under which the reviewers can then understand the whole or the totality, full scope of your application. Outcomes and impacts, we want to know that you understand or gather data or have data about in connection with the program that you're proposing. So it says, what are the needs that your program is designed to address? So do you have data that says, number one, this need exists, right? If I'm trying to start a hot air balloon camp in Richmond, and people are like, why does he want to start a hot air balloon camp in Richmond? Is there some data that says that this is something that could benefit Richmond youth from birth to age 21, right? And it may not necessarily be that the CDC has released something. It could be something that you've been involved with for 15 years and you have your own data. But we want to know that you're looking at numbers and you're gathering data, inform your decisions, not only to inform and identify the need, but to inform and identify why you're proposing the project that you're proposing, because you have data that says that providing these types of services or making these types of spaces available benefit young people in specific ways. Describe how you will measure the performance or achievement. So generally, we want to know that you are evaluating your program, right? So it's not just we do good work and we know we do, but we have our own set of criteria and here they are. We recognize that this criteria matters, and this criteria matter, and we judge ourselves. And when we meet these five criteria, we recognize we have success. And we have tools that gather this information so that when we come to look at our criteria, we can determine, hey, we're at 88% success, we're at 91% success, we're actually at 76 this quarter, and we're up to 74 or down to 74. So we want to know that you're doing your due diligence and being critical and doing some evaluative practices yourself. And we want you to be able to list or identify what those performance measurements have looked like for your organization for the last up to 3 years. So some organizations may be new, they may not have 3 years worth of performance measurements. But whatever you have, we want to know that you have a track record of success, and we want you to share that with us. Next slide. Required resources. So this entire section is on budget. I'm going to flow through it very quickly because we're going to go to the budget table. Here we want to know what the total proposed annual program expenses are. So again, we're operating off of the fiscal year, not necessarily the calendar year. We're not operating, the City of Richmond's grant funds are based off the fiscal year, which is July 1st through June 30th. We're not operating our financial calendar is not operating off the calendar year. So we want to know from July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, what do you project your annual expenses will be? And then we want you to tell us what your program expenses are in the following questions, right? And speak to how your numbers are based off of some reasonable, knowledge-based information at how you get to where you get to. And they aren't arbitrary, but they're based off of in relationship to who you support, your staff, your supplies, et cetera. And we finally want to know information around resources, because we are about sustainability, and we don't want to be RFCY funding to be the only funding source that organizations have, because that's not sustainable. When organizations only receive funding from us and then they don't receive funding from us in the subsequent year, that great programming, that great design, that structure that you provided, and the impact that you've had in the lives of young people and their caregivers goes away. And that's not good. Next slide. So let's jump into the budget. So as we transition from that last slide on budget, we're transitioning to this slide on the budget table. What's important is that the numbers, my first tip on this, the numbers need to match. So that first page of our proposal had organizational budget, it had proposed budget, it had ECIA grant request. Those numbers are all here, right? So for Callie's organization, Kids Space, she's telling us her organizational budget is 200,000. That means on that first page, that number needs to match here, right? She's telling us that she wants 30,000 in RFCY request under this RFCY request column. That matches. She's telling us her total project budget is 50,000. So those numbers need to coincide with what's on the first page. This budget template is structured in a way that we have revenue, or what you bring in on the top, and expenditures, what you plan to do with what you brought in on the bottom, how you plan to spend that money. The last question we talked about, question 14, talked about sustainability. That's where we want to speak you to identify. You spoke to it on question 14. We want you to kind of highlight it in this table here on revenue. For Callie's table, she has a few categories of funding that she's got. She's got some membership fees, she's got donations, she's got in-kind donations. There's a pretend foundation, which isn't real, it's made up. And then she's got the RFCY grant. She lists all of those. And under total project budget column, she says how much of each is getting her to her total project budget. The RFCY request column should only have what she's requesting from RFCY. And in that revenue status column, there, she tells us whether these funding sources have been approved or processed, or whether they're pending. So we want that same information. We want to know that you're going after grants. We want to know that you're fundraising. We want to know that you're generating revenue, that you're generating income. And we want you to list it here. Below in expenditures, with the $30,000 that Callie is requesting from us, she breaks out how she anticipates spending that money. And she tells us what categories or buckets she plans to spend that money in. So she's got program supplies, she's got rentals, she's got field trips, and she's got salaries. And she lists there 5,000, 10, et cetera. Under total project budget, she lets us know, hey, I'm requesting 5, but the total is 10. Facility rental, she's like, I really need it all from you, and et cetera, as we go down in sequence. The proposal narrative there, she gives us some detail, right? Under each category, what that means to her, what her program supplies include. And this information is important. I just want to tell you, once you get past the narrative section and the reviewers are making funding recommendations, this budget table is gold. So getting this right, making this clear is very important, because once they like your organization and you score well, then the conversation is how much money do we want to give them? And making this clear, right, is very important, because that clarity gives the reviewers confidence that, hey, we can give them more money because it's very clear about what it is that they propose to do with each dollar. Here, Callie's got go-kart, and she gives us some parameters around why the numbers are what they are. She's got field trips, and she gives us some parameters, 25 to 50 youth at $200 a day. She gives us some parameters around why she's getting at those numbers, and that type of clarity gives reviewers confidence. So this budget table here is very important, especially when you get in the room about funding recommendations. Next slide. Here we have our demographic table. And again, you've spoken about demographics in the proposal. They should align and match here. Overall, you can see at the top, we want to know how many young people do you plan to serve, right? And we want to know what are their ages and what are their ethnicities. And then we get down to how do they identify based off of gender, right? For Callie, she's identified male, female, and young people that identify as non-binary, for again, a total of 50. And then we also want to know where these young people are going to be coming from, right? So because the RFC and the Department of Children and Youth in relationship to the charter, we are responsible for moving the needle as it relates to services and programs that support young people. And so we need this information, and you are going to be required to be tracking this information. At the bottom here, you can see there's a little narrative. If something's unclear or you want a little space to provide greater clarity to why the numbers may be what they are, you can do that. We do know, right, that these numbers are projections and they might change, right? You're putting an application in January, that your program may not start until after July. Things change. We want you to give us your best guess as it relates to the ethnicity, the age brackets, the gender identity, and the zip codes. Next slide. Here, activities and projections. This was also in our proposal. It's just structured in table form, right? So for Callie's program, Kid Space, she's got really 2 major components or program activities. She's got tutoring, and then she's got field trips, right? For the tutoring, it's going to be individual. There are going to be 5 sessions per quarter. She's anticipating serving again 50 young people, and it'll be an hour. She's got staff tutors. There's going to be group work for the field trip. She's going to try to do 1 per quarter. She wants everybody to participate. They're going to be about 3 hours, and they're going to go to museums, planetariums, and more for outside classroom learning. Love this. Very simple, very clear. It speaks to what is in the proposal narrative, and that is very important, is that those things align. Next slide. Callie also lets us know the months that she's planning to operate, the days of the week she's planning to operate, and the hours. I know this may seem like a lot, but again, it's important for us to gather this information, because when we go to our board and we talk about the services we're providing, in Callie's program, she's not providing services on the weekend, which is fine. But if we're trying to build a cohesive cohort of grantees, we may be interested in having organizations that actually do provide services on the weekends, right? So we're not saying for you to adjust your programming. We want you to be upfront and honest with us about the type of programming that you do, so that we can build a good cohort of individuals who are going to be providing services. Additionally, we want to know where you're going to be providing services. I just want to reiterate something that I've called out in the past. It's important that not only do you provide services to young people from various area codes and zip codes, but it is also important, we think, that there be equity in place. It is important that young people actually receive services in the area codes and zip codes that they live in. And I want to call that out, because we think that that's a valuable thing to do. So I'll say that. Next slide. So I'll turn it back over to LaShonda. I think I did pretty good on that part. I went through it quicker than I thought I was going to.
Hey, there's a quick question if you want to answer in the Q&A about the, I can read it to you. In the activities projection table, do the numbers in the average number of participants need to be unduplicated numbers, or can there be overlap?
Great question. So on the demographics table, we're looking for unduplicated young people.
All right.
That was
All right, well, thank you, Patrick.
all right.
And I will go through our next steps, and then we will open it up for any additional questions and questions that any of you may have. Next slide, please. So here's our review process. So after you have done an amazing job, you've listened to our presentation, you went back, you've watched the video again, you've read the strategic investment plan, you've done everything you need to do, and you have written a absolutely wonderful application. You have checked every box, you have done everything we've asked of you, you submit it to us. When you do that and it's complete, you will go through this wonderful review cycle. If it's not complete, that's a whole different story. So we, like Patrick said, we don't want to turn you away. We want to be able to have your application reviewed. So please make sure you adhere to all the guidelines and answer all the questions. So once we receive your application, what we do as staff is we do what we call a threshold review. We will review your application to make sure you have submitted all the required documents. We will look to see if you've answered all the questions, but we won't allow you an opportunity with regards to your application to update your application. Once you submit it to us and it's the deadline has passed, your application is submitted. And if you fail to complete it, then you're going to submit an incomplete application. But depending on the attachments that you may or may not have included, we may contact you and ask you to, and give you an opportunity to submit some attachments that we are requiring you to do. So we do our threshold review, and we have in the past not pushed some through. So please don't let that be one of your applications. We will push through the ones that are complete, and we give those to our review committee. Our review committee will consist of individuals from the city of Richmond, so city staff, not any of us from the Department of Children and Youth, because we do the threshold review, but people from other departments. We have worked with staff from other governmental entities, so Oakland, San Francisco, San Pablo, who also have departments of children and youth. We have worked with people from the business community or residents. We also have utilized some of our oversight board members. So we have a diverse group of review committee members that will score independently applications based on priority areas, and then they'll rank those. And then we get to rank those proposals by priority area. And so once all of that is done, staff looks at everything and prepares a package to be submitted to our oversight board. that will then look at the recommendations that came from the review committee, and they will make a final determination of recommendations for grant awards by priority area that then will be provided to City Council for their review and consideration. So City Council, per the charter, has the final say in if the grants are approved, but they can't pick which grants they want to see funded or not. What they have to do is kind of give a thumbs up or thumbs down to the entire recommendation. And last year we got a thumbs up. And so there's some language in the charter that dictates when the council can make a different decision that is not an affirmative one. And all of these meetings, the RFCY Oversight Board meeting, as well as the council meeting, both public meetings. And so community members, organizations have the ability to come and listen to the dialogue. And if you have any more questions, need any more information about the review process, it is included on pages 47 and 48 of the application, or the guidelines. Next slide. So here are all the things that we require of you if you are recommended for funding. So the fund doesn't stop after you submit your application to us. If you're awarded, we ask that you submit to us the required information for us to have you be a vendor in our system so that we can pay you. You have to have a business license. We have to have insurance so that you know your program, your project is covered. We also will enter into a grant agreement with all of you, and that grant agreement as a template is attached to the one of the documents that's in the appendix of the application, so you can see what it is we're asking you to do before you make a decision to apply. And once you receive the grant, we will be doing site visits, so at least one throughout your grant period. It could be virtual if you're having virtual programming. It could be in person, just depends on what it is. We will do at least one. And we will try and invite our oversight board members to also attend those site visits, so they also can see what it is you're doing. If you are having any material that you are flyers, anything like that, we do ask that you reference the city and the Richmond Department of Children and Youth, Richmond Fund for Children and Youth as a grantor on those materials. And then you will be required to submit timely reports and invoices to us. Next slide. We always have questions about funding. We know people, of course, like to you get funded, you want the actual money to do the work. So we would prefer, if organizations are able to do this, that awards be done on a reimbursement basis, which means you front the money for the program, you submit invoices, reports to us, and then we reimburse you. If everything is together in your report and in your invoice, that turnaround actually for us is relatively quick. It can be about 2 weeks and maybe sometimes less. If an organization, and we completely understand this, is unable to front the funds and then wait for reimbursement, we will allow for advance payments up to 75% over 3 iterations, 3 periods. And then that last 25%, as an organization, you will need to figure out how to run your program for the last part of your program, and then submit all your final documents, including your invoices, final report, make sure we have everything we need from you, and then we will cut the final check for that last 25%. And so if you're awarded, once the grant agreement is executed, we will work with you to submit the required information to us so we can do your initial 25% advance. You provide information to us after you spent that 25%, done the work, and then we can issue, if everything looks great, we issue you another 25%, and that happens until you reach 75%. Next slide. Here is a snapshot of our timeline, which is included in the guidelines. And so we released the RFP on December 27th. This is our second pre-proposal meeting, information session. And as we stated earlier, this is being recorded, so we will post it onto our webpage so you can look at it again or share it with other organizations that may be interested in learning more. If you have questions that we were not able to answer, they can be submitted to us by January 21st at 5 p.m. We will take 10 days to be able to respond to those questions, create an FAQ, and then both post that online as well as post it through our bids online system. Applications are due, our proposals are due Monday, February 7th by 2 p.m. As Patrick stated, Our system is already set up to shut down at that time. So if you are unable to submit your application, please look at your clock because it may be after 2 p.m. Please don't wait till the last minute. Sometimes there are technical difficulties. You don't want a lot of people trying to get into the system at the same time. So give yourself enough space and time to submit your application. And if you run into problems, please give us a call. And our plan is to do a lot of the review, as we stated earlier, between the months of February, March, April. And we want to go to both our oversight board and our city council for approval of recommendations for funding in May of 2022, so that we can begin to enter into our negotiations and contract agreement in the months of end of May and June, so that we can enter into fully executed grant agreements at the beginning of our fiscal year, which is July 1st, 2022. Next slide. Well, that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for your time. And you see our Instagram, Facebook information there, as well as our website, and you can email us with any questions, and we'll put that email address in our chat. But we thank you, and let's see if we have any outstanding questions or any additional questions. All right, so I see if we applied for a previous fiscal year, but were not awarded, can we receive feedback on our proposal? You sure can. Please give us send us an email. Like I said, we'll put that email address in the chat so everyone can have it. But you can send us an email. It's youth@ci.richmond.ca.us. Thank you, Lupe. And let us know that you're interested in receiving feedback. We are happy to do that. And if Lupe, can you let people know how to ask questions if they have it?
Yeah, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand in the chat. If you happen to be on the phone, I believe you can press *9, and that will also raise your hand if you want to ask something live.
Oh, let's see, one says one attendee. Oh, Cordell. Okay, hold on. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good. So thank you for that presentation. I really learned a lot. So I know I asked this in the other session, but can neighborhood councils, that work with youth apply for this grant?
Yes.
I know that I said that earlier, and I say, damn, just wanted to be sure.
No, you're doing your job.
And then also, when I was looking at that previous slide regarding the expenditures, now I know this don't come up too often, but suppose if a neighborhood association don't have an ED, well, I know that sounds dumb. That's that.
So if an organization like a neighborhood council, and LaShonda can jump in here, this would be my recommendation, is I would recommend that you put the chairperson of the neighborhood council, right, as the executive director, and them or their designee that will be responsible for managing the grant as the project manager. Now,
Good to know.
You have to have a 501c3. So the neighborhood council would have to have a 501c3, or they would have to have a fiscal sponsor. And so LaShonda can jump in if there's something.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, that would be my approach.
Yes.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you, Cordell.
LaShonda, I want to just share something quickly. I just want to share the page, just so
Okay.
that you can see it. So Lupe, I'm going to just stop sharing, and I'm going to just share the page, just so people can see it. So if you're on the city's webpage, to get to the grants page, you're going to go department, and then children and youth. Then you're going to click on RFCY grants. Now you're on the grants page. And it's got some information here on some basic information about you've already joined the webinar, how to sign up for e-news, how to communicate with us. And it's got the online application. So what you are going to do is you won't complete those questions on the portal. What you will do is you will download this proposal narrative template, this demographics template, this activities tables template, and you will download the budget template. And here below, we have the budget template in Excel if people feel more comfortable with that. We do Word because sometimes people aren't as experienced or knowledgeable in utilizing Excel. You will download those documents. You and your team will save them to your network or your desktop or some hard drive and begin drafting responses and gathering information and coming up with your projections as it relates to some of these numbers and how you want to present yourself in the proposal narrative. Once you've completed these documents, you finalize them, and you've also gathered your 501c3 letter, your financials, your list of board of directors. If you're entering into an agreement with a government agency or applying as a collaborative, your LOA, you will click here. And on this page, you will provide us with some additional information. It's a little redundant. We're going to ask for some information you've already provided. And you'll complete that. You'll select your priority area, and then you will choose a file and you will upload that file. So I'll click choose file, and I have a set of documents here that I could then select, right? And I might select one, right? And click open. And so now I've uploaded there. So you're gonna download those templates from the previous page, finalize them, complete them, and then you'll come to this page and you will merely be uploading. Our recommendation is that you don't begin to upload because this system doesn't accept partial uploads. So you need to, it's kind of an all or nothing. So make sure you have all of your documents gathered when it's time to come in and upload, right? You'll provide your required documents here. So it is a simple process of just merely uploading documents. And when you scroll down to the bottom, you'll identify that you are authorized to submit the application, your signature. And I recommend that everybody request to receive an email copy of the form to serve as a receipt. And then you just press submit. So it's not fancy, but it is effective and it's simple. We wanted to make it easy for ourselves, make it easy for you. So I'm gonna go back, download these documents, complete them in your Word processing Office Word suite. And then you select this, and then you just merely complete the form and upload the documents. I see there are some questions. It looks like there are questions.
Yeah, so I know someone mentioned it earlier, but they asked, or they said the thumbnail for the RFP has the dates for 2021. So I think we will be uploading the new deadline, the new timeline on this page. Because I don't think we have it listed anywhere.
Okay.
And then the other question from Stephanie is, can you show us where to find the grant agreement template, please?
We haven't sent out a grant agreement template. So that's kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit. Typically, we send out the grant agreement template to organizations once they've been awarded funding. And so just as an FYI, if you want to see a template of a grant agreement, you're welcome to email just for your own records, just for your own information. I'll be happy to share it. It's not a secret. But for the sake of the application, typically we just don't include it. But if you would like to see it, we can definitely see it. So I see Stephanie has hand raised.
Oh, Patrick, let me, because I did say, I stated that because I thought it was one of our attachments that we usually will let people see what the template looks like for the grant agreement so people know what they're entering into, along with our insurance requirements and those things as part of the RFP.
Okay.
So I believe it should be an attachment in the RFP, but if it's not, we will make sure that it's on our website so people know what it is we are asking you to do in the case that you are awarded a grant.
Yeah, we can stick it on this page here.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Another question from another attendee is, what is the best or preferred file format for uploading the documents? And is there a size limit?
There is no size limit in Microsoft Word, because that's where the documents are. So if you're talking about whether it's 2097 to 2001 versus docx or whatever, I don't think it matters in that regard. But a Word doc, these are all Word docs. We really tried to make it simple and very easy, because most people have access to a version of Microsoft Word. So Stephanie has her hand up and I want to acknowledge it. 1 second. Stephanie? Stephanie, you can talk. I don't know if you're muted. Maybe we answered the question. Okay. So I'll stop sharing. If there are any other questions or available. All right, Shonda, I think we might be finished.
Well, thank you everyone so much for your time on a Tuesday afternoon. And look back, please go find our website and check out the different resources and information and documents that we have there. And as we stated, we are recording this and we'll place this on our website, hopefully this week, so that you can go back and watch it. And then we'll make sure we update our site with some of the additional attachments that we mentioned today. So thank you, Lupe. Thank you, Patrick, so much. And reach out if you have questions. Good luck, everyone.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.